Namaskar and welcome to this exciting new Sattology show, debunking mythology. And today we have a very interesting topic. We just see, we just saw a large celebration of Ram Bhagwan Ram Temple and inauguration, the first brick-laying ceremony, and it was a live telecast from India. But the jubilations are still going on. People are celebrating even now. Yesterday night, many cities in USA celebrated Diwali because yesterday was 5th August for Americans. And today we are again continuing with the same mood, same topics, and we want to see what went right and what went wrong. We will also contrast that with situation in Turkey and other places where some groups have expressed their unhappiness. Well, when Bhagwan Ram temple is being constructed and some groups express unhappiness, they automatically go on the side of Ravan. So we don't want to play it out, but that's how Ramayana was. So without delay, let's welcome Sri Carpentier, a very respected personality from New Delhi. I think you know more about Indian history and politics than most of the Indians do. And because of your own research and most of your own analysis and articles, and you know the inside story of everything. So how do you compare Turkey's Erdogan, usurping the Christian church for the purpose of a mosque in 21st century and comparing it to Ram Mandir?
Well, good morning again, Namaskar. And as you said, the topic is very actual and very thought-provoking. Because on the one hand, we have a long-standing demand from a vast number of practitioners of Hinduism, but not only, also practitioners of kindred faith or traditions, such as Jainism, Buddhism, and even Sikhism. And they will, by the way, all be honored and given a place at the Ram Mandir temple, which will be built. So that long-standing request coming from hundreds of millions of people was to duly restore and celebrate the birthplace of Lord Ram, or King Ram, or Prince Ramachandra, as he is very usually known, who is not only one of the foremost heroes and divine figures of India, but who is also what you might call a mythological, sattological figure and a hero in most of Asia, in great parts of Asia, especially Southeast Asia, East Asia, and even countries like Korea. So Lord Ram has remained an extremely popular and inspiring figure, even in Muslim majority countries such as Indonesia and Malaysia. So then, in this light, you cannot deny the secular nature of Ram as a character and of the Ramayana as an epic. We are talking about civilization and culture before we talk of religion. In fact, in the days of Lord Ram, there was Dharma, not religion, since religion is very much what you might call a Semitic concept which evolved in a Judeo-Greco-Roman framework. So before that, what you had was a universal code of ethics, which was practiced all over Aryavarta or Bharatvarsha, India today. And we can see that because throughout the travel of Lord Ram for rescuing his kidnapped wife, you see that he meets a lot of people and of different tribes and different cultures. And everywhere he honors their local traditions, and he sometimes fights them because they attack him, but most of the time he finds hospitality and a sense of fraternity and kinship, such as, for example, with the Nishadas, who were tribals. Guha, the head of the tribals, and the name Guha probably implies that he lived in a cave, because Guha also means cave in Sanskrit. So he might have been a cave dweller. And we see him receiving Lord Ram with great magnificence and giving him the best that he has to offer. And Lord Ram embraces him, even though according to the the concept of caste that has now pervaded the vision of ancient Indian history, Lord Ram should have kept his distance, social distancing, as we say today, because Lord Ram belonged to a very prominent aristocratic clan, whereas the Nishadas were forest dwellers. And we can say the same about Sabari, the pious woman from a very humble background who welcomed Ram at the ashram in the forests, and also about Hanuman and the people of the Vanaras who were called, who are assimilated to apes or monkeys, but who in fact were probably a tribal group in the forest who probably had the monkeys, probably the langurs as their totem. So in that context, there is no question that we are not talking about a religious sect that is exclusive, and therefore there is no conflict at all with secularism if we understand secularism properly. I think it is a very great misunderstanding that is shared, unfortunately, by many Muslims as well as Christians, that Lord Ram embodies some sort of a particular religion, which, like many other religions, would be exclusive and therefore would not welcome people who don't belong to it. In fact, if you look at the famous conflict, which is the theme of the Ramayana, the war between Lord Ram and Ravana, who has abducted his wife, we see that Ravana, who was a very powerful king, worshipped Lord Shiva, and that he respected Sri Ram. So essentially there was respect between the two, except that they fought because Ravana had done a wrong deed. He had kidnapped Lord Ram's wife and was not willing to return her, and therefore he had to pay for that crime. But in that context, there is a very, I would say, universal appeal of the epic, and that is why people who are protesting the rebuilding of Ram Temple have to be seen as people who are misled and who are just ignorant, or who are prejudiced because of certain other political agendas that they may support. Now, if going to Turkey and to the famous case of Hagia Sophia, as you know, and as most people know, Hagia Sophia was built as the imperial cathedral of the Eastern Roman Empire. It was, in fact, the most magnificent building of its time in the Mediterranean world. And even today, it is regarded as a foremost achievement of architecture, to the point that the Turkish sultans who conquered Istanbul, Constantinople, which became Istanbul in the late 15th century, kept imitating Hagia Sophia in the building of their mosques. All the great Turkish mosques of the Ottoman period are, you might say, closely inspired upon Hagia Sophia. Now, the Turks, of course, turned Hagia Sophia into a mosque because, being their imperial capital, Istanbul could not be built around a Christian church. So naturally, Hagia Sophia became a Muslim monument. However, when Kemal Atatürk became the head of the Turkish state and decided to build a secular republic, he decided that there was no possibility of turning Hagia Sophia back to the Christians, since that would have been a mark of preference to another religion. Therefore, he made it into a museum. I believe that was in the year 1934. And so it remained until a few days ago, when President Erdogan, as part of his agenda to essentially Ottomanize Turkey, to make Turkey into an Ottoman state again, in other words, a Muslim state, decided to return the mosque to return the building rather, to Muslim worship, which in itself is a bit problematic because there are very rich miniature, there are, there's a lot of iconography in Hagia Sophia. There are many mosaics of Christ and saints and angels, which is not normally allowed in a Muslim house of prayer. However, they decided to keep a compromise. You see, they had covered some of the images in order not to violate Islamic precepts. But that shows you the problem that that in a way they are using a building which was obviously not built according to criteria of the Islamic faith, but they are doing it as part of a political agenda. And there has been, of course, discontent and protests in many countries. But all in all, it has been accepted that even though the original purpose of the building was Christian, that Muslims, after all, had the right to use it as they deem fit in view of the fact that it's a Muslim majority country. On the other hand, there seems to be a very, almost impossible to understand resistance all over the world to the building of Ram Temple because it has been once and for all dubbed by certain interest groups as a violation of the secular character of India and an insult to the Muslims. Because, why? Because there was a mosque from the 16th century standing on that site, which had been built by a Muslim conqueror, Badr, who founded the Mughal dynasty. And we should recognize that Ayodhya had absolutely no meaning, religious meaning for the Muslims. It was only a political statement that made them build a mosque there in order to show the supremacy of Islam. But there is no Muslim majority in the city of Ayodhya, and there is no particular historic significance attached to it apart from the fact that it's a memory of a conquest. Therefore, there is plenty of justification for a temple to be built on the site on which it has been now proven archaeologically that there stood an original temple on essentially to commemorate the birthplace of Lord Ram.
Excellent points you made. One of the things which just out of the mind came to me is called reciprocal immigration, because when these people in their own countries they don't experience religious freedom, and they come to other countries, they cannot adjust themselves. Turkey is a very good example. The Turkey used to be a secular state, and now Turkey is in the middle of a kind of renaissance where Turkey is not ideally the secular state which Ataturk formed. And when these people again start coming to the west or to the east, some of them, they usually come to the west. They try to impose their own nation's belief on the local societies. And they also want the local societies to accept them as per their belief in their own country, while ignoring the rest of the local society. It's happening in Germany when the Turkish will move to Germany, or Greece, or they are regularly threatening Greece, and then they come to Hindus and give them a lecture how to be a secular. So such a I would say astounding stupidity. Like, you cannot imagine that somebody who a terrorist is giving a lecture to the Indian Republic, where there is a lot more freedom of faith and culture and religion. You can be anyone you belong to, even though there is an underlying overwhelming presence of Hindus, which is natural because you're in a land where majority of people are Hindus. So what do you say on that, sir?
What I would say first and foremost is that you see, secularism again is an extremely cloudy term, because if you're looking at it from the standpoint of Christianity, as you know, originally secularism was defined by the church as whatever was outside the convent or the monastery. Therefore, it was well understood that society was Christian by then, and that everyone would be and should be a Christian. But if people went about their business for the mundane matters of life, they were regarded as secular, which doesn't mean that they didn't go to church. So, in a sense, the concept of secularism as promoted in the West, which in French does not even exist, it's called laïcité, means that you are essentially keeping religion to yourself. And if you have a particular place of worship, you go there, but you don't really promote it, and you probably don't even talk about it socially. It's considered to be purely in the private domain. Now, in a society where everyone is pretty much of Christian background, some practicing and some not, it doesn't seem to pose a problem as such, except society gradually loses sight of its values and of its traditional system of thought. You know, I mean, I was interested yesterday in hearing Trump, I think it was yesterday, to Lou Dobbs on television, and Trump contrasted his voters, his followers, to his opponents. And he said, you know, my opponents don't believe in the fundamentals, which are, and he gave three fundamentals. One was the Bible, the other was guns, and the third was oil and gas. And so that shows you pretty much where the American conservative ethos lies. And he said, as opposed to that, all these Democrats and far left, you know, they are against these three things. They are against the Bible, they are against guns, and they are against oil and gas. Now, this is just a bit outside the theme, but it is to show you that secularism can be a very, very elastic thing, because obviously if you believe in the Bible, you are not secular as such. But once again, if you have a belief that your religion is the only true religion and that others are essentially wrong, naturally, logically, you would want to bring your religion by peaceful means or non-peaceful means to other people in order to save them. And as opposed to that, we see in the case of India, essentially a secular civilization which has preserved the belief systems and icons and deities of many, many different groups, and which has let them coexist peacefully. You know, the Jains and the Shaivites and the Vaishnavas and the Buddhists and hundreds of others, including Christians and Muslims. But then if you remember that famous speech by Muhammad Ali Jinnah, who is regarded as the founder of Pakistan, the founding father of Pakistan, he gave that famous speech in Karachi, I think just a couple of years before partition, in which he said, you know, we cannot coexist in a single nation with Hindus because our heroes and our interpretation of history are opposed to theirs. What we regard as heroes, they regard as invaders. And the people that they regard as heroes, we regard as idolaters. And as barbarians, essentially. So as a result, he said we have to be separate, even though in Jinnah's mind, Pakistan, like India, would be secular. You see, that's where the contradiction began, because a secular Pakistan is certainly not what we conceive of now. But in Jinnah's mind, it would have been a sort of secular state, a bit like Britain, but for Muslims only, pretty much only for Muslims. Understanding that there might be minorities, but the minorities would have to accept the rule of the Muslims, even if it wasn't in Jinnah's mind the rule of Islam. So if you understand that in a historical perspective, you see why in his mind and in the minds of many others, partition had to occur. But that should not give the people who remained in India as Muslims the right to have a sort of a veto over what Hindus do. Obviously, if you are living in a majority country, you know, as the old saying goes, in Rome do as the Romans. If you are living in a Hindu majority country, do expect the Hindus to carry on with their traditions and their ways of worship. You cannot say, oh, but you know, you are offending me if you are doing this because I am here too and you have no right to do this. If you really don't think you can live in such a country, then you should move to a Muslim country where this problem will not occur, will not face you. But you know, I would then like to go further into two kinds of mistaken interpretations of the nature of Sanatan Dharma and extensively the nature of a tradition, of a sampradaya. On the one hand, you have what I would call the historical materialistic mistake. And that is a mistake that most historians embrace today, in which they will tell you, you know, anyway, Lord Ram probably never existed. He's just part of a myth. It's some sort of story, you know, that was carried in some legend and it was made into an epic. But there is no reason to believe he existed because it's so far away and there are many things that are said about him that do not look real, so there must have been an invention. And this, of course, can be applied to almost anyone. It has been said about Jesus Christ, he probably never existed. It has been said about the prophets of the Bible, they probably never existed. In the end, if you take that attitude, you can always find reasons to deny the historical existence of any great hero or god, especially if he's regarded as a god. that is one mistake which has essentially made rationalists in India and elsewhere disregard Lord Ram, of saying, what's the point of having or making all this fuss about someone who never existed? It's just a story. That, of course, means that you cannot understand the people who are convinced that Lord Ram existed and was a real figure. Then you have, of course, the other misinterpretation, which is to say, well, since he existed and since he was a man, then, we must have really aggrandized him and magnified him. He wasn't that great, just like Jesus Christ was not that great. He didn't do all the miracles, and most of the prophets were people who were misled or who had sort of visions that may not have been real. So at that point, you then end up reducing everyone to the level of some sort of historical, relatively unimportant anecdote, which was somehow built up over the centuries. And then you end up disregarding it or discrediting it as well. And therefore you say, what's the point of having such a great hullabaloo about Lord Ram? He was just a king, and he probably was a tribal king, and he fought in the forest, and he went to get his wife back. So in both cases, you are essentially ignoring, or you are at least demeaning a tradition, and you are denying the credibility of that tradition. And the people who are in either of these two categories, the rationalist or what I would call the historicist, they end up being out of touch with a vast majority of their own people. And one outstanding example is Pandit Nehru. Because Pandit Nehru was very much a Western trained man, very rational, very intelligent, very cultured, but then he himself said, a lot of Hinduism is just about, epics and traditions. But as a rational man, I'm interested in growth, development, economy, technology, science, and I have no use for this. I mean, it's all right to have nice dance and music. That's very much the Indian culture. But the rest is pretty much irrelevant at this point. We are living in the age of scientific temper, as it would be. So you see, that is an outstanding example of what has prevented many of the leaders of India and of other countries from embracing the faith of the vast majority of their own people. And of course, now the present government and the present prime minister has given a very different example, because he has made a commitment in his personal task to honoring the essential faith of India and the tradition of Sanatana Dharma.
In the US and many parts of the world, people who had moved out of India very long time due to colonial issues or something else, they practice the faith very, very strongly. Like in the US, Trinidadians and Guyanians, and then you had Caribbeans, a lot of people from these countries who had moved out of India centuries before, Fijians, and also people from surprised a large community in Mexico and Brazil who practice this faith. Also, the American Hindus who have found this faith new due to various Hindu organizations. Collectively, they make up a much, much bigger number than Hindus from India. Hindus from India in US now, it's a minority. It's still 35% or whatever it is, but just 35%. Rest 65% is from other countries and USA itself. So now the Hindus, the confused Hindus from India, they have an identity crisis. They are meeting with the people who have acquired this faith new. And obviously people who have come to any faith new are more fanatic about their beliefs. These are the people who are claiming Lord Ram's identity in the US. And therefore, neither the Muslim groups or any other groups can stop them, because they don't look like Indian Hindus. They are regular people here, and they have strong faith. So this phenomena has baffled the Islamists, and they are not able to get it. How is this possible? But statistics show that on their own, without any forced conversion, more and more people are looking for faiths where they can do yoga, meditation, they believe in karma, they believe in reincarnation, all essential parts of the Hindu faith. More and more people are willingly adopting. It's not that Hindus are preaching to them. They're willingly coming on board, they're reading Bhagavad Gita, they're getting convinced. So it's a new type of Hindu which is as assertive as a Western person, but at the same time, it's very deeply through faith connected to India. Now, this is what US is seeing, and I'm sure the British and also other parts of the world where it is very prominent, especially Austria and Hungary. Austria and Hungary has declared Hare Krishna as their religion or one of the official, other than the church, you can practice that also. They declared that. So this phenomena is catching up in the US and it's going to go very big. There are 40 million yoga practitioners in the US, 40 million. And there are 5 million yoga teachers. There are one teacher to every 8 students right now. So how does, and if you contrast this with India, then most of the Hindus in India, they're attacked by leftists, secularists, and all kinds of other people, and they're very defensive. So when they come, they like to be very broad-minded, but when they meet these people who are openly talking about their faith, they have they also have to change. So this phenomena is already rattling. So my question to you is, how will the Islamic world see this new resurgence? You know, they may hate whatever they can about Ram or anyone else, or they can have problems with rationality, and or they, according to their own book. How will they see this resurgence now, these Islamists?
I can't speak for them. I think that, as you are aware, many of the Hindus living in America, including those Hindus who came from India or whose parents came from India, are sometimes much more conservative in certain ways about their religion than many Indian Hindus, simply because what you might call the traditional simple Hindu who lives in villages or small towns or in big cities but who hasn't gone to university, especially not abroad, then he's likely to be a fairly devout follower of his Dharma, of his particular sect, if you want to call it that way. On the other hand, people who are highly educated and who have gone to Western universities, they may or may not believe intellectually in their tradition. Some of them have gone to the left and have become materialist or skeptical or agnostic. And others, on the contrary, will have a very enlightened understanding of their own religion. Today, I was listening to the current Vice Chancellor of Jawaharlal Nehru University, and it was very admirable how he was blending the philosophy and the religion of India with modern science because of his extensive understanding of both. And the same can be said about another Vice Chancellor, the former Vice Chancellor of the university. So these are just two examples among many. So it shows you that by all means, the Hindu, the Sanatana Dharma tradition is very much anchored into India. And let's face it, you mentioned a few countries in the West which have opened up to Hinduism and to various aspects of the Hindu way of life, but I can mention others. I can mention Russia, where Buddhism is one of the 4 official religions, but where many people have gone back to Vedism. You know, they feel this is the religion of their ancestors, and they do in some way inspire themselves and practice certain aspects of the Vedic rituals. And then Iran, where the youth is fascinated by all the techniques of meditation and yoga, especially the upper middle class youth in the big cities. Or China, where a lot of people are turning to Buddhism and to a syncretistic mix of Taoism and Buddhism, which was the Chinese traditional ethos. So you see, this is happening in many parts of the world. Talk about Korea again. And there are many countries that we don't even know of, but where this is happening. So Italy, for example, where there are many people who follow either Sai Baba or who practice or who are followers of many of the other great gurus and teachers from India, such as Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. So all that tells you that there is a growing build-up of this new consciousness, which is guided by a scientific appreciation of the unity of life and of the ecological uh, necessity for balance and for harmony. Now, this, of course, is very disruptive to people who are holding on to very literal interpretations of their own religion, whether it's fundamentalist Christians or fundamentalist Muslims, because they believe all this must be some sort of devil's seed. It is idolatrous, it is pagan. That's what they have been taught, and that's what they have great trouble letting go of. So they have this great misgiving and this great resistance. But let's face it, these spiritual cultural movements cannot easily be stopped, because eventually they are accepted by people not because they are forced to do so by the politics or by force, but because they just find their real sense of purpose and their real sense of mission and their well-being within that framework. So there is going to be resistance. There is always resistance to anything new, but no matter what, it will proceed.
One last question, and this has come from the audience. So you are from France, and you're living in New Delhi. How did you adjust to New Delhi from France? This is just a very casual question by one student. I had to take it.
Well, I came here as a child, so with my father. I was 14 years old, and we traveled throughout India. In fact, my travels are somewhat related in a book which I called Memories of 101 Moons, an Indian Odyssey. So that is the story of 7 years, almost 8 years of traveling throughout India and meeting a vast number of people, all the way from Indira Gandhi to many sages, many Maharajas, many very simple, ordinary people, scholars, scientists. I would say the gamut of Indian society. So obviously, for me, Delhi became maybe not Delhi so much, but India became a home, a karma bhumi. And now I have been for many years living part of the time in Delhi, so Delhi is also very familiar to me. And in any place where you spend a certain amount of time, you get your habits and you find yourself at home. So it's a very natural process. And Delhi, even though Delhi in the last few months has gone through hard times, as you know, because of the pandemic, and there has been a sort of a very heavy atmosphere. But otherwise, Delhi is quite an interesting city with a very stimulating cultural and intellectual life.
Thank you, Sri Carpentier, and also all the viewers who watched it live. I'm really happy that many people joined today. And due to the time limitations and also a link getting expired, we have to stop this show. And for those of you who have more questions, you can watch this interesting discussion on YouTube and comment there, and we will again have a session where Sri Carpentier can speak to us again. Thank you all, and namaskar. Have a nice day.
Good morning.